In a luxurious mansion, a billionaire discovers that items from his storage room have gone missing 3 times in just 14 days. Suspicion falls on his elderly black housekeeper, the woman who has served his family for decades. The next day, he secretly follows her after work to uncover the truth. But what he finds doesn't expose a thief. It shatters his assumptions and changes everything he thought he knew. Before we dive deeper into this story, tell me where you're listening from. And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something special waiting for you. Ethan Alexander Reed was not a man who missed details. At 35, he ran a multinational real estate empire with the kind of precision normally reserved for brain surgery. People described him as brilliant, decisive, emotionally distant, but efficient to the core. He dressed in charcoal suits with barely a crease, spoke in crisp tones that left no room for guessing, and moved through life as if every second not accounted for was a failure in leadership. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't warm. He simply operated on a level where empathy felt inefficient. That morning, Ethan delivered the keynote at the summit on sustainable housing and tech innovation in city redevelopment. The applause rang out across the convention center as he stepped away from the podium, his custom suit catching the light just right. His speech, built on data-driven models and ethical ROI, was hailed as sharp, forward-thinking, and truly visionary. He nodded through the compliments, posed for the requested photos, then slipped out exactly 2 minutes ahead of schedule. The drive home to the northern suburbs of New Haven was silent. He didn't like music in the car. It distracted him. Instead, he reviewed a dashboard of live company metrics on his tablet: project overruns, hiring delays, shipment efficiency, investment risk scores. Everything was within thresholds, as it should be. His estate recognized his vehicle on approach. Gates opened automatically. Lights inside adjusted. The front entrance clicked open before he reached the last step. Marlene Thompson was standing just inside, as she always did. No words, just a nod and a slight adjustment of the folded towel in her hand. "Welcome home, Mr. Reed," she said softly. "Anything urgent?" "No, ma'am. Your messages are on your desk. Dinner will be ready at 7. He nodded, already halfway up the stairs. Marlene didn't follow. She returned to the kitchen, disappearing into routine. Marlene had worked in the household since Ethan was 8. After the accident that took his parents, she had been the one to sit by his bed at night, the one to comb his hair before school, the one who remembered which foods upset his stomach, which nightmares made him cry, and which stories calmed him back to sleep. She had never asked for recognition. She had never expected it. Over the years, her presence had become part of the house, like the polished hardwood or the steady hum of the grandfather clock. Later that evening, while reviewing the latest performance reports from a portfolio partner in London, Ethan noticed a system flag in the home management app. It was minor. 3 instances over 14 days of unaccounted-for items from the pantry and first aid cabinet. Quantities were small: a few cans, a couple of protein bars, a bottle of antiseptic, all flagged by the automated log as missing with no associated event. He stared at the notification. It wasn't enough to trigger an alarm, but it was inconsistent. And Ethan did not tolerate inconsistency. Not in his business, not in his home. He accessed the internal access logs. Only 4 individuals had nighttime clearance to storage: himself, his assistant, currently on vacation, the estate's head chef, who hadn't worked nights in over a month, and Marlene. Her name appeared on 3 dates, each between 10:15 and 10:45 p.m., perfectly aligned with the anomalies. He didn't react outwardly. He simply sat back, stared at the screen a little longer, and felt something shift in his chest. Not anger, not suspicion. Something colder. The kind of feeling you get when someone you thought you understood suddenly doesn't fit the picture anymore. It wasn't the food. It wasn't the supplies. He had more than enough. It was the silence, the secret act. Marlene had access. She knew the system. She could have asked, but she didn't. He turned off the monitor, closed the tablet, and looked towards the hallway. The house was quiet, impeccable. Marlene was somewhere in it, folding linens or adjusting the evening lights, doing what she had always done, supporting his life without ever stepping into its center. And for the first time in years, Ethan realized he had no idea what Marlene Thompson did after she left the estate. No idea where she went, who she talked to, whether she had family or friends, what she ate for dinner when she wasn't cooking his. He knew the time she woke up, the way she pressed his shirts, the exact temperature she steeped his coffee. But he didn't know her. And now, for reasons he couldn't yet name, that felt like a problem. Ethan didn't sleep well that night. It wasn't tossing or pacing. It was the kind that lived just under the skin, a tightness, a quiet pulse in the chest that refused to be reasoned away. By morning, the feeling hadn't passed. By the following evening, it had grown into a decision. He told his assistant to clear his last meeting. No details, just reschedule. He turned down dinner with investors from Boston. Then, just after 9:30, Ethan stepped into his own car, a sleek, black electric SUV with tinted glass, and drove himself out of the estate. He took the long way through the city, past the banks that bore his name in steel, past the high-rises where he knew every tenant by lease and profit margin. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, only that he couldn't ignore it anymore. By 10:15, he was parked down the street from the estate. From that angle, with the windows dark and lights automated, it looked like a showroom, not a home. He watched as Marlene stepped out the side gate, carrying the same canvas bag he'd seen folded in the laundry room earlier that week. She wore a long navy coat that kept warmth in and questions out, and a scarf pulled neatly across her neck. Her steps were steady. Not hurried, not secretive, just deliberate. Ethan waited until she turned the corner, then followed. She didn't take a car. She walked to the bus stop, waited under the flickering street lamp, and boarded the city line toward the south side. Ethan trailed behind in silence. Never too close, always just far enough. The further they went, the more the scenery changed. Manicured sidewalks gave way to cracked pavement. Luxury condos became weathered brick. Storefronts dimmed. Street noise shifted from upscale nightlife to the hum of tired machinery and distant TVs. When Marlene stepped off the bus, she moved through the neighborhood like someone who belonged. No hesitation. She turned down a narrow side street, past a closed dry cleaner, then slipped into a low building with faded paint and barred windows. The sign above the door read in peeling letters, Community Youth Resource Center. Ethan parked at the far end of the block and approached on foot, stopping just short of the entrance. He peered through the side window. Not to spy, he told himself, but to understand. Inside, Marlene was arranging food on a folding table, plastic containers carefully packed, diner style, clearly labeled. She laid out rice, beans, cooked greens, soft dinner rolls, and soup. Steam rose from the containers, fogging the air slightly. Around her, about a dozen children, ages 5 to 12, waited in quiet lines. They didn't rush. They knew her. One girl, no more than 8, asked, "Where's this food from, Miss Marlene?" Marlene smiled, warm but tired. "From good people who didn't need it, but I made sure it got here while it still mattered." The girl nodded. No more questions, just gratitude. Marlene handed her a plate and moved to the next. Ethan didn't move. He barely breathed. It wasn't shame he felt, not yet. It was the sharp sting of not being trusted, not being included. She could have asked. But instead she took what belonged to him, no matter how small, and carried it out the door like it was hers to give. It wasn't the food. Of course it wasn't. It was that she chose not to tell him. That she assumed she had to work around him, not with him. That after decades of quiet coexistence, she still didn't think he was the kind of man you could come to with a need. He watched a while longer, arms crossed, the night air thick around him. Marlene didn't look like someone getting away with something. She looked like someone doing exactly what she believed had to be done. Calm, firm, steady. The same way she had pressed his shirts, packed his bags, folded his sheets, except now she was doing it for someone else. Without his permission, Ethan turned from the window and walked slowly back to the car. The streets were quiet. The sky hung low and gray. He sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, staring at the dashboard, thinking how strange it felt to be on the outside of something that involved his own name, his own property, his own house. He wasn't angry, not in the way people expect anger to look, but he was something. He just didn't have a word for it yet. The next afternoon, Ethan found himself in front of a building he wouldn't have noticed any other day. Low, old, beige with peeling paint. The entryway was cracked, the doorbell long broken, 3 mailboxes taped shut, names written in marker. He had parked around the corner, walked the last block alone, and now stood at the base of the narrow stairs, trying to understand what he was doing there. He climbed slowly. The stairwell smelled faintly of bleach and fried onions. The hallway light flickered. He paused in front of apartment 2B and knocked twice. A small boy opened the door, maybe 9 or 10, thin with big eyes and cautious curiosity. He wore a faded hoodie and mismatched socks. When he saw Ethan, he didn't flinch. He just blinked. "Are you Mr. Ethan?" Ethan hesitated. "Yes. Is your grandmother here?" "Not yet. She's still at the center. You want to come in?" Ethan stepped in slowly, almost unsure of his own weight. The apartment was small, spotless. Walls faded, but decorated with family photos, religious prints, and hand-drawn pictures, some clearly the boys'. Furniture clean but second-hand, arranged with care. In one corner, a bookshelf with worn paperbacks. "You want some water?" the boy asked. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. "Sure." The boy disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a cup. "It's warm. The fridge doesn't get cold anymore." Ethan took it. "Thank you." "You look different than the pictures. Older." "What pictures?" The boy pointed to a small frame on the shelf. Ethan walked over and saw a grainy newspaper photo of himself as a child, maybe 10, at a groundbreaking ceremony. Next to him was his father. Behind them, barely visible, Marlene holding a clipboard. "My grandma says you were a good boy, just quiet, always thinking." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He looked around. On the wall near the kitchen, a framed certificate. "Certified Practical Nurse, State of Connecticut, issued 1990. He turned to the boy. "Your grandmother was a nurse." She was, but she stopped when someone said they didn't want a black lady touching their baby. That was a long time ago. Ethan looked back at the certificate. He didn't speak. "She tried to volunteer at clinics after that," the boy added, "but she said she got tired of being thanked with silence." There was something sharp in that sentence. Ethan felt it lodge in his throat. "She works a lot," the boy continued, "and she never takes anything from your house unless it's stuff people were going to throw away. Like food marked expired. She checks the dates. She says she'd never give us anything that could hurt someone." Ethan sat on the armrest of the couch. "What's your name?" "Jamal." "Nice to meet you, Jamal." Jamal nodded politely. "You ever been here before?" "No," Ethan said quietly. Jamal looked around. "It's not fancy, but it's safe. That's what Grandma says matters most." Ethan nodded, eyes lingering on the details. A stack of medical papers on the table. One an insurance form half filled, another a medication list with check marks. Beside them, a bottle of generic pain reliever, half empty. Everything in the room told a story Ethan had never asked to hear. The door opened. Marlene stepped in, grocery bag in hand, and froze when she saw Ethan. Surprise flickered across her face, then softened into something gentler. "Well," she said, setting the bag down. "This is unexpected." Ethan stood, unsure whether to apologize or explain. Marlene looked from him to Jamal. "Did he offer you water?" "At least he did," Ethan said. "Good," she smiled faintly. "I raised him right." She took off her coat, hung it neatly by the door, and turned back. "I was going to make something simple for dinner. You hungry?" Ethan hesitated. "It won't poison you, Mr. Reed," she added with a small smile. "Just beans and rice." He nodded once. "That would be fine." Marlene worked quickly in the kitchen. Jamal helped set the table with quiet confidence. Ethan watched like a visitor in a country he'd never studied. Marlene moved differently here. Not careful, not deferential, just herself. And it was the first time he realized he had never truly seen her be that person. During the meal, they talked about small things. Books Jamal liked, the weather, a teacher who said Jamal had potential. Nothing about work, the house, or the food that traveled between them. It was just dinner. Ordinary. Kind. Yet as the meal ended and Jamal carried dishes to the sink, Ethan felt something settle in him he hadn't expected. A kind of peace laced with discomfort. Because this version of Marlene, laughing with her grandson, explaining how to cook rice without wasting gas, humming while rinsing plates, was so far removed from the quiet shadow who pressed his shirts that he wasn't sure which one was the real her, or worse, if he had ever really known her at all. The drive back felt longer than it should have. The streets were nearly empty, washed in the quiet yellow of early evening streetlights. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, though the road barely registered. His mind was still in that small apartment with the uneven floor, the faded photos, the quiet boy, and the woman who had moved through his life like clockwork for 2 decades. The scent of beans still clung to his jacket. He hadn't said much when he left. Just thank you. Marlene hadn't asked why he came. She didn't press, and somehow that unsettled him more than if she had. When he arrived home, the house greeted him in the usual way. Lights adjusted, temperature perfect, a soft chime. But nothing felt right. Not tonight. He bypassed the living room and kitchen and went straight to his home office. The monitors blinked awake. He ignored everything else and pulled up the inventory system. He reopened the flagged reports. 3 incidents over 14 days. On first glance, Marlene's name lined up perfectly. But now, after everything he had seen, felt, and tasted, he looked deeper. He opened the time-stamped kitchen scans. Staff were required to log expired or discarded food weekly. Most did, but not all. On each flag day, there was a matching entry by the sous chef labeled menu substitution. A few lines down, items marked for discard. Not removed, just marked. The final deletion log was missing. He ran an audit with his override key. Of the 10 food items flagged missing, 7 had been recorded earlier that day for discard due to nearing expiration or damage. The remaining 3 were non-conforming stock. Defective packaging, not selected for menu service. All flagged as waste, none scanned out. He moved to the medicine cabinet log. Same issue. A bottle of antiseptic passed its usage date by 48 hours. Allergy relief with a missing cap. A nutritional shake in damaged packaging, all scheduled for replacement. None scanned out, all flagged as missing. What the system called a breach was human oversight. A skipped step. And Marlene, with her usual care and silence, had likely seen what no one else bothered to see. That those items were still safe, still usable, still able to help someone who needed them. He sat back. The room was dim, lit only by the monitor's glow. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and closed his eyes. There was no theft, no deception, just an invisible act of quiet salvage, of service. And he had assumed the worst. He hadn't accused her, but he had doubted her, even for a moment. And worse, he hadn't known her well enough to know better. He opened her personnel file. Sparse. Start date, pay history, emergency contact, none. Performance record, flawless. Note section, blank. 27 years of presence. No incidents, no recognition. He typed into the log. Discrepancy resolved. No further action required. Human error. Mine. He saved it, closed the file, and sat in the silence. He thought about the warm water Jamal served, the mismatched socks, the way Marlene offered dinner with ease, as if welcoming him into her world was simply natural, the photo of himself on her wall, the medical forms, the certificate from a career ended by prejudice. He had spent a lifetime building systems, eliminating inefficiencies. He believed in clarity, evidence, control. But tonight, what unraveled him wasn't a system failure. It was a failure to see, to ask, to know. He wondered how many other people had moved through his life unnoticed, not because they were quiet, but because he had never thought to listen to the silence they carried. He stood and walked into the hallway. The house lit his path with soft light, but it felt colder now. Not because the temperature changed, but because something in him had. He passed the kitchen, paused, then opened the pantry. Everything lined up, labeled, perfect, and meaningless. He closed the door, turned out the light, and went to bed. Not because he was tired, but because he didn't know what else to do next. Tomorrow, he thought, he would. 3 days passed before Ethan returned. Not because he was avoiding it, but because words felt too small. An apology wasn't enough, and anything more felt presumptuous. But on the third evening, just after sunset, he stood outside 2B again, his hand raised to knock before he could talk himself out of it. The door opened quickly. Marlene stood there in a simple sweater and jeans, hands still damp from dishes. She paused, expression unreadable, then stepped aside without a word. Ethan took it as permission. Inside, Jamal lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, forehead damp with sweat. A humidifier hissed in the corner. Marlene motioned for Ethan to sit, then disappeared into the kitchen and returned with warm tea. She handed it to him silently, then sat at the dining table, eyes on the boy. "How long has he been sick?" Ethan asked quietly. 3 days. Low-grade fever, wheezing, night cough. Same as last winter," she said. "Pediatric asthma comes in waves." He nodded. "Has he seen a doctor?" She met his gaze. "Soon." He didn't push. He looked around, the medical forms still stacked, the nursing certificate crooked by the bathroom door, a new prescription bottle half full on the counter. "I checked everything," he said quietly. "The logs, the inventory. It was never about you. It was the system. Or me, not questioning it sooner." Marlene didn't flinch. She dabbed Jamal's forehead gently and pulled the blanket higher. She didn't answer. "You should have a better place than this," he added. That made her look at him. "I had one," she said calmly. "A 2-bedroom near a good school, before my daughter got sick. We sold it for treatment. What we didn't sell went to debt. Then she passed. Then Jamal got sick. Then the center lost funding, so I started bringing the kids here after hours." Her tone never turned bitter, just matter of fact. "You make enough to afford another home," Ethan said carefully. "My salary covers rent, food, and medicine," she replied. It doesn't cover stability, Mr. Reed. That costs more than money these days. He leaned forward. Then let me help. You already have, she said, nodding at the tea. You came back. He set the cup down. I can do more. I want to. She smiled gently. Ethan, I never resented you. You were a child when I came into your life, and you grew into a man with responsibilities I can't imagine. I watched you build your world. I never expected to be part of it. I was there to keep things steady while you moved forward. That was my role, and I accepted it with pride. She paused, looked at him fully. I love you like a son, but I never mistook myself for your mother. I knew my place, and I never blamed you for the distance. I always hoped, though, that if life brought you back, you'd know the door was open. Ethan swallowed hard. Then let me stand in it now, not to fix the past, just to be here. As you are, she said. That matters more than you know. Jamal stirred, murmuring. Marlene knelt beside him, whispered in his ear, then retrieved a nebulizer, plugged it in, and placed the mask over his face. Ethan watched, something twisting inside him. He had seen quarterly losses, rescue deals, but never someone care like this, asking nothing in return. Let me take him to my doctor, he said. Tonight. He's not breathing right. Marlene hesitated. We can't afford. You won't have to. That's not how this works. It is now, Ethan said firmly. They locked eyes. Then she stood. I'll get his shoes. The hospital lobby smelled like antiseptic and fresh paint. Ethan paced while Marlene sat beside Jamal, stroking his hair. The nurse called them in after 20 minutes. Ethan insisted on staying, answered questions, filled forms, signed everything. Later, in the hallway, Marlene approached him, shoulders tense but voice calm. You did all this without asking me. I know. I told you we're not a charity case. You're not, he said, but I owe you more than charity. I owe you everything I forgot to see. She sighed. He needs more than prescriptions. He needs hope. So do I, Ethan said, and I think you've given it to me, whether you meant to or not. She nodded slowly. Then don't disappear when it gets hard. I won't. That night, Ethan stayed at the hospital. He ignored 37 unread messages from the board. He sat in the hallway, listening to the monitor's rhythmic beep, thinking of all the things he didn't know how to say, and all the ways he could start doing more than saying them. At some point, Marlene brought him a blanket, folded, no words, just a look. He pulled it over his shoulders and closed his eyes. Not because he was tired, but because for the first time in years, he felt safe enough to rest. It was nearly noon when Claire walked into Ethan's office without knocking. She moved with sharp precision, heels clicking softly on marble, a beige folder under one arm, sunglasses perched on her head. She didn't speak until the door clicked shut. You missed 2 strategic planning meetings this week, she said. Ethan looked up from his screen. I rescheduled them. I didn't think an explanation was needed. Claire exhaled through her nose. She set the folder on his desk like evidence. People are talking. Investors, partners. Your absence is noticed. They want to know if you're still running the company or checking out. Ethan closed his laptop. I'm not checking out. I'm choosing where to be present. Claire raised an eyebrow. And where exactly is that? At a hospital bedside for the grandson of my housekeeper. He didn't flinch. He has a name. It's Jamal, and she's not just a housekeeper. Claire folded her arms. I'm not here to question your empathy, Ethan. I'm here because we built something real, something powerful, and you're risking it by letting sentiment guide you. He stood slowly. Let me tell you what I saw this week. I saw a boy struggling to breathe while his grandmother tried to stay strong. I saw forms she couldn't afford to sign. I saw a woman who never asked for anything holding it all together with a plastic spoon and a heating pad. And I saw a system, my system, that didn't account for her. Not because she was invisible, but because I never bothered to look. Claire softened slightly but held her ground. And how does that help the board, the foundation, your name? It helps me become someone worth carrying that name. Silence stretched. She glanced out the window, jaw tight. Do you know how hard we worked to get here? How many optics we maintained? And now you're throwing it into a community center with hand-painted signs. No, he said. I'm choosing to support something that never had signs, never had attention, never had people like us show up and just listen. Claire stepped closer. Is this guilt? Because guilt fades. It's not guilt. It's gratitude and clarity. I'm starting to see how small I was in the world I thought I ran. Her eyes narrowed. So what now? You become a mentor? A hero? He shook his head. I just want to be decent. That feels like a good start. Claire glanced at the folder. The board has questions. If you keep making unsanctioned disbursements without a framework, you risk losing confidence. Then let them vote. She studied him, then sighed. You used to call me first when things got complicated. This isn't complicated, he said. It's simple. I want the world I live in to include people like Marlene and Jamal, not just people who manage them. Her mouth tightened. You used to see things in structures. Now you're chasing shadows. No, he said. Now I'm chasing what's real. Claire left the folder and walked out. I hope you know what you're doing, Ethan. He nodded. I finally do. When she was gone, the room felt lighter. He set the folder aside, opened a blank page, and began drafting a personal funding structure, one that didn't need permission, one that answered only to the people it served. Not for recognition, but because for the first time, he knew exactly what he stood for. Jamal opened his eyes quietly. The next morning, the hospital room was dim, blinds half drawn, gray light slipping in. Ethan was already there, paperback in his lap, phone face down. He hadn't left. Jamal blinked, reached up, and pulled the oxygen mask away. Did you sleep here? Ethan looked up. I did, in that chair. Jamal smiled small. You're not very good at sleeping, huh? Not really, Ethan admitted. But I'm learning. The boy shifted under the blanket. Did you bring that space book again? Ethan pulled out 3, one on planets, one on astronauts, one with glossy deep space photos. You pick. Jamal chose the one with stars and black holes. Ethan scooted closer and read, voice quiet but steady. Marlene appeared at the door 15 minutes later, watching without interrupting, paper bag of food in hand. She set it on the windowsill and sat quietly, letting the words fill the room. When Jamal fell asleep again, Ethan looked over. He's doing better. She nodded. I know the signs. Ethan handed her a coffee he'd grabbed earlier. She took it without protest. They sat in silence, watching Jamal breathe. He asked if I'd come next weekend, Ethan said. Marlene glanced at him. And what did you say? I told him to save me a seat. She smiled, small but real. He likes you. That means something. He sees me, Ethan said quietly. I think that means everything. 2 days later, when Jamal was discharged, Ethan drove them home. Marlene didn't argue. She sat in the back with her grandson, hand on his shoulder as the car glided through the city. They didn't speak much, and didn't need to. As Ethan carried their bags up the stairs, Jamal looked up from the landing. Are you coming back tomorrow? Ethan adjusted the strap on his shoulder. I'll be here before you finish breakfast. Jamal grinned and pushed open the door. By Saturday, Ethan was at the community center again. This time he didn't wait for an invitation. He showed up, rolled up his sleeves, and started stacking chairs. The space was busy. volunteers setting up reading stations, parents dropping kids early. Marlene was placing plastic cups beside a cooler of juice. She looked up, surprised but not startled. "You came back." "I told you I would." "Yes," she said, handing him napkins. "But people say a lot when they're feeling needed." He didn't answer, just started arranging cups. 10 minutes later, a 6-year-old girl tugged his sleeve. "Are you the guy with the books?" Ethan crouched. "I might be. What do you like to read?" "Dragons, but only nice ones." "Let me see what I can do." By noon, kids were calling him Uncle E. He led story time. Laughed, really laughed, when one handed him a drawing labeled Uncle E and the Super Readers. He kept it in his coat pocket all day. Later, as kids left, Marlene stood by the door with a clipboard. Ethan leaned against the wall, watching her work. Steady, patient, lighter. When the room emptied, she handed him a bottle of water. "You handled the sugar rush better than I expected." "I've handled boardroom buyouts," he said. "That was tougher." She laughed, enough to show he wasn't wrong. They stood holding bottles, looking at the chalkboard where a child had written hope in bright pink. "Thank you for staying," she said. "I didn't know how much I needed to." When he left, Jamal walked him to the steps. They sat, knees touching, eyes on the street. "Do you think people can really change?" Jamal asked. Ethan thought about boardrooms, bedsides, the weight of a child's trust. "Only when someone sees them enough to believe it." Jamal looked up. "I see you." Ethan smiled. Then no layers, no rules. Just a man on a step beside a boy who had every reason not to trust anyone, and still did. It was a beginning, and he was exactly where he wanted to be. The following week, Ethan arrived at the center in the afternoon. No tie, no driver. He had called ahead to meet the volunteers who ran the programs. They gathered in the back room, folding chairs in a circle, clipboards ready, caution in the air. Ethan stood, not to dominate, but to be seen clearly. "Thank you for making time. I know you have more important things than listening to a guy in dress shoes talk about community. I'll keep it short. I've been here a few weeks. Not long enough to know everything, but long enough to know what I missed before. You're holding space for people no one else does. I want to support that, not by leading, but by giving you the tools to keep going." He laid out a proposal. Dedicated fund, monthly disbursements, no branding, no PR, just steady resources and freedom to use them where they mattered. No approval through his office, no photos. A volunteer raised her hand. "What do you want in return?" Ethan smiled. "I want to stop showing up like an outsider." The room exhaled with cautious agreement. Marlene, who had stood quietly in the corner, walked over after. "You just gave up all the control." "Maybe I never needed it," Ethan replied. A few days later, he asked Marlene to meet him at the Community Foundation office. When she walked into the boardroom, she paused. "Why am I here?" "Because this is your program now, not just the kitchen and books, the budget, the direction, the voice." Marlene stared at the empty seat. "I've never sat at a table like this." "You've led without one for decades. Now I'm just giving it a name." She searched his face. No irony, no pity. "You sure about this?" "Completely." She nodded once and sat down. That was all it took. Back at the center, Jamal was moving with more strength. Cheeks with color, steps steady. He helped smaller kids with puzzles, pointed out books he'd read, explained words with earned confidence. One morning, a 5-year-old tugged Ethan's jacket. "Are you Jamal's dad?" Ethan chuckled, crouching. "No, I'm lucky to be his friend." The girl nodded, satisfied. That weekend, the center held its first open house under the new funding. Marlene had planned it with the team. Speeches, shared meal, table of free books. No stage, just people, food, stories. When she took the mic, the room stilled. Marlene stood tall in a simple dress and cardigan. No pretense. We didn't start this with plans or budgets. We started because kids needed a safe place to be themselves. We added books, food, medicine because they needed those too. But the only thing a community really needs to grow, to survive, to feel whole, is to be seen. Sometimes that's all it takes. Someone noticing we're here. Ethan listened from the back row, arms crossed, not to protect, but to hold steady. Something loosened in him with every word. Afterward, as chairs were folded, Marlene passed him leftover rolls. They liked what you did today. It wasn't about me. She nodded. Exactly. They stepped outside into fading light. The street was quiet, the air still buzzing with what had been created. You didn't change the world today, Marlene said. No, Ethan replied, but I helped someone dream in it. Her hand brushed his elbow lightly. That's how it begins. Neither needed to say more. The email came on a Wednesday, tucked between a medication reminder and a book drive notice. Marlene almost deleted it. Subject: Invitation to Speak, Community Voices in Education Conference. They wanted her to speak at a city forum alongside educators and advocates about the reading program, the kids, her story. She didn't reply that day. On Friday, she mentioned it to Ethan outside the center while Jamal played soccer. I got a strange email. They want me to speak at some conference. That doesn't sound bad. Marlene crossed her arms. They must think I'm someone else. Ethan watched the kids, then turned to her. If the room exists, it's yours to walk into. They don't decide if you belong. You do. I've never stood at a podium. I speak to kids on carpet squares and moms in kitchens, not professionals in suits. Then speak like that. That's why they need you. She paused. You think they'll listen to someone like me? Ethan didn't blink. I did. That night, she replied. Yes. Jamal helped her practice at the kitchen table. He made gentle edits, keeping it hers. Plain words, real sentences. One night he asked, Are you nervous? She nodded. I've been invisible most of my life. Standing up there feels like yelling in church. Jamal smiled. Maybe that church needs to hear it loud. The morning of the event, Marlene wore a clean cardigan and slacks. Good shoes shined. No slideshow, no script, just folded notes in her purse. Ethan sat 2 rows from the back, quiet support. When they called her, she walked calmly to the front, unfolded her paper, then didn't look at it. Good morning. I didn't come to impress anyone. I came because someone finally asked. I don't have a degree in education. I'm not a director. I'm a grandmother raising my grandson. Every Saturday I sit in a folding chair and listen to kids read out loud. Not because I was trained, but because they needed someone who cared enough to stay. She told them about Jamal, the center, kids reading by hallway light, sharing granola bars. She told the truth. Then she added, Years ago, I helped raise a boy whose parents were taken too early. He grew up in a house too big and too quiet. I made his lunch, folded his shirts, walked past his trophies. He never asked about my life, and I never expected him to. But I watched him grow and loved him like a son, even when he didn't see me standing there. And now he sees. That tells me we can all change if we let ourselves. At the end, you don't need a title to lead. You need presence, and you need to care. She stepped down. No standing ovation, just deep, felt applause. Afterward, people lined up. A teacher asking advice, a nonprofit offering books, a city official wanting a meeting. Marlene took cards with both hands, smiled small, said, "Thank you." Outside, Ethan waited on the sidewalk. "You didn't even look at your notes." "Didn't need them." "How did it feel?" "Loud," she said. "But good loud. The kind that reaches places silence never could." That evening, on the porch, Jamal handed her a juice box. They sat quietly until he asked, "You gonna do more speeches now?" "Maybe," she laughed softly. "But not for applause." "Then why?" She looked at the sky, then the quiet street. "Because somewhere out there is another woman like me, sitting in the back of a school hall, thinking her voice doesn't count. Maybe if she hears someone like her speak, she'll believe she matters too. And maybe she'll stand up." Jamal leaned against her shoulder. "You made them listen today." "No," she said softly. "I reminded them we're still here. The boardroom hadn't changed. Glass walls, steel chairs, filtered water." Ethan stood at the head, palms flat on the wood, voice calm. "I want to restructure a portion of our community investment portfolio. Autonomous, separate advisory board, independent metrics." "What's the return?" "Lives, stability, trust." "Who decides where the money goes?" "People on the ground. Educators, parents, community leaders, and Marlene Thompson will be one of them." Murmurs, notes scribbled. Claire shifted at the far end, pen tapping. "You've diverted significant attention from core business these past few months. Some question if your focus is sustainable." Ethan clicked the screen. An image appeared. Jamal reading to 2 younger kids. "Saturday Reading Circle," chalked behind him. "We built success by solving problems others overlooked. We anticipated needs. We created value. But lately we've measured impact by margin alone. That's not enough. We have the chance to invest in what matters before it becomes a crisis. I'm not walking away from the company. I'm walking deeper into it." Claire spoke. "And the brand, the optics?" "The brand will survive telling the truth. For years we benefited from a community we rarely spoke to. That stops now." She tapped her pen twice, then nodded. "I don't agree with all of it, but I've seen what it's done. Maybe that's the part I needed to see first." The vote passed. 2 weeks later, Ethan sat in his study with a blank document. "Dear Thompson, a different legacy. Anonymous funding. No donor walls, only one rule. Recipients never required to perform gratitude, just to keep building, keep living." He met Marlene at the center that Saturday, papers signed. She listened on the back bench under the tree. "You're not giving anything, Ethan. You're returning it to the world that raised you." He looked at her. "Thank you." Jamal handed him a handwritten letter that afternoon. "Uncle E, if I ever become a doctor, I want to open a place like you did where no one has to show their wallet before they show their wounds. Thank you for seeing us. Love, Jamal." Ethan kept it in his wallet. The following month, Marlene was introduced at an internal leadership summit as an external advisor. No speech, just a seat at the table. Afterward, Ethan and Jamal walked through the company atrium, pausing at the photo wall of past presidents, including Ethan's father. "You think they'd be proud?" Jamal asked. Ethan thought for a second. "I think they'd finally recognize me. And you." As they left, an employee passing by said, "Morning, Ethan." "No title, just warm." Ethan nodded, holding the door for Jamal, who stepped inside like he belonged. Because now he did. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.